Okay, let's get started. All right, well, good evening and welcome everyone to the American Cetacean Society San Francisco Bay Chapter's February 2025 speaker event. And I'm Susan Hopp, board member responsible for our speaker program, and with me is fellow board member Wade Cobb. So first, for anyone new to the American Cetacean Society, we are a chapter within a national organization that is the oldest nonprofit dedicated to the protection of whales, dolphins, porpoises, and their habitat. And we do this through education, community engagement, and awarding grants towards cetacean research. So we appreciate your donations in support of our mission. Donations fund our research grants and expenses for these talks. And it's easy to donate on our website if you haven't at time of registration. And in our upcoming newsletter, you will be able to see those donations at work as we announce and share the research that will be funded by our two 2024 grants. So again, thank you so much. And then another quick announcement. In March, we will be accompanying our March speaking event with something new. It's a fundraising online auction of cetacean art pieces created by fellow board member and artist Firuze Goche. So that's going to be really fun. We're going to try something new. But for tonight, we have something very exciting. And I want to just say as you know, we're recording this. So please put any of your questions in the Q&A. That's actually much better than the chat. And then we will get to them after the presentation. So tonight, we are traveling to Nicaragua to learn about a humpback whale population segment that has been the object of study only since 2016. And for us as cetacean lovers, we can be really excited for the new knowledge emerging, driven by a new generation of marine biologists. And our speaker this evening represents this new generation and really shows the impact a dedicated scientist can have. Dr. Joëlle De Weerdt is here to update us on what have we learned so far about humpback whales in Nicaragua. Dr. Joëlle De Weerdt is the founder of the Cetacean Conservation Program of her nonprofit Association ELI-S. Joëlle launched the first effort to protect the endangered humpback whale population in Nicaragua and is an award-winning ocean conservationist. The project aims at collecting baseline information on humpback whales, various dolphin species, and sea turtles. She participated in the development of the first whale watching law developed in Nicaragua in 2021. Through her project, she has raised awareness to more than 200 children and hundreds of fishermen in local communities, removed more than 1 ton of trash from the beaches, liberated 7 olive ridley turtles, 1 brown booby, and 1 mother humpback whale from fishing nets, rescued 1 green turtle from death, and removed waste and ghost nets from the ocean. She investigates various aspects of population ecology to understand the potential threats and offers solutions to the endangered Central America humpback whale population and other marine fauna. She completed her PhD research this past October on humpback whale ecology and is currently working as a Fulbright scholar at the University of Santa Cruz at Ari Friedlander's lab. Joëlle, thank you so much for all your work to date and for being here, and we hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Suzanne, for the presentation, and thank you so much for having me here today. It's a true honor to be able to present my research to enthusiasts, cetacean lovers. So I can't wait to share the result of my research. So today I want to talk about whatever I have discovered about humpback whales that are occurring in Nicaragua. And I think you did a great job in saying my name. So it's Joëlle De Weerdt. My last name is actually like sounding a little bit Dutch. I speak French and I speak Dutch, just for the little information. But I think you did great. For now, you can just say Joëlle, it's fine. All right. So before I start digging into the whales, I really would like to talk a little bit of my background, of my story. Why am I studying whales if I'm born and raised in Brussels? Because I think it's interesting also for the future generation to know that everything is possible. So I had this childhood dream to protect whales and dolphins, like I guess most of us. And that led me to study biology at the University of Brussels. So I obtained my master degree in Belgium in 2010. And well, I wanted to work with marine mammals, and people were saying, well, if you want to work in marine mammals, then you probably have to gain experience in the field and you should volunteer on different projects. So that led me to different countries. So I'll guide you through these different flags. So first I went to Madagascar and I first saw humpback whales, because what I didn't mention is that when I obtained my master degree in biology, I haven't seen a single whale or a single dolphin in my entire life. So I was not even sure I actually wanted to do that. It was a dream, but I was not sure I really wanted, yeah, if I would like it. So I went there in Madagascar and I was lucky enough to I didn't witness the birth of a humpback whale. However, I could spend some time with the newborn humpback whale calf, and that has been a real revelation for me, that I got totally hooked by the research. I looked up all the scientific literature I could find about mother calf pair humpback whales, and I got completely interested in yeah, I completely connected with whales. After that, I went to Great Britain to study dolphins. After that, like dolphins was like, they're so small, when you see whales for the first time and then you see dolphins, the size difference is very impressive. Then I went to Slovenia, where I did an internship also on bottlenose dolphin research. And in 2015, I went in Mexico in the Whales of Guerrero project. And there I reconnected with humpback whales. And after all these years of volunteering, I just saw like different ways and methods of doing whale research and conservation. And I really liked it that, just research on its own was probably not the only thing that's very effective for whale and dolphin conservation. So I decided to create my own project in end 2015, and I started Association ELI-S, and ELI-S means Education, Liberty, Independence in Science. And I decided to combine educational activities and conservation actions with scientific research. And so this is how my journey kind of, as an independent researcher, started. I applied in 2015. I applied for a PhD scholarship that I unfortunately didn't get, because there is this rule that when you finish your master degree in Belgium, at least, well, you need to apply for funding like within 4 years, and you cannot be older than whatever. So just the requirements made me, reduce the opportunities for PhD scholarships. And unfortunately, I didn't get it. I was pretty inexperienced in writing, and anyway, so I didn't get it. And I was very disappointed, but despite the fact that a lot of people were saying, oh, studying marine mammals, especially large baleen whales, is really hard and whatever, name it, I just thought I'm going to do it. With or without money, I will figure it out and I find a way. So in 2018, I went to my university in Brussels, and one of my professor asked me, hey, Joel, what are you up to? I'm like, well, I started this project in Nicaragua and I'm trying to publish papers and, doing my research. He was like, well, basically you're doing a PhD. I'm like, well, was a big reduction, but I was like, well, kind of. And he was like, well, in Belgium, you can do a PhD 1 year if you want. Like, you don't get money for it, but you could, get the PhD title for it. So I was like, Right, I'll do that. I'll start a self-funded PhD, trying to find my funding by myself. And I was like, 1 year, what is a year in a lifetime if I can have a PhD? At the meantime, I received the Jane Goodall Award, the Young Researcher Award, for my work in conservation and research. I received other awards from other organizations I didn't write here, but just because I'm working with local communities, because I think it's very important to include local communities in research efforts, not just going there, taking the data and bye bye. I don't see anyone. I really want to involve the people and make sure that they're aware of whatever I'm doing. So I'm really investing a lot of effort in doing information sessions and so on. In 2022, I started collaborating on a regional level with WWF, the IUCN, and the IWC. So IWC is the International Whaling Commission, and the IUCN is the International Union for Conservation of Nature, and that's the organization that's giving the status for different species in the world. I just want to mention I was invited as an expert. They didn't provide any funding. However, I was very proud to be part of this regional effort to define blue corridors for whales and a management plan. In 2023, I was very happy to go for a big event that's organized by Whale Trust, where I could present my work in the US. So that was like my first time in the US. That was pretty exciting. And then in 2024, so if you see the calculation between 2020 and 2024, it did not take 1 year. Okay, that was a beautiful dream. So it took me more than that. However, I'm very, very happy I made it. It was a very tough road and journey, definitely, and pretty challenging, but I made it. And what I really enjoy of all of that is that I got a Fulbright scholar. So for me, it was really the little cherry on the cake, the little present of you did all this effort and now you got a Fulbright. So now I'm currently at the University of Santa Cruz doing this Fulbright project. And then this year I went back to Whale Tales in Hawaii, and I'm very fortunate to be, sorry, I wrote LA, but it's San Francisco. So at the American Cetacean Society of the San Francisco Bay chapter. I'm so really sorry about that. So, but the whole point of the journey is that I always want to do science for a purpose. What does it mean? I have been to many conferences and we are all aware there are issues and challenges we are trying to work on, but I really, really want to have, this science being used for something, for a purpose, and for a purpose of what? Of protecting whales and dolphins, so reconnecting to my childhood dream. So that is very important. I'm keeping this as a red line throughout my journey. So I created a cetacean conservation project in Nicaragua. So where I was doing research, I was doing education, well, I'm still doing, and doing all these conservation actions. So just to not go too much into detail, but so that you're aware what it all means, this educational aspect since 2016. So I've been training students, supervising master students and bachelor students, but also giving a training program in the field. And I trained more than 50 students. I gave more than 250 workshops with kids of the local community, and a lot of fishermen attended our information sessions. So the impact is really, really important into the local communities. And by the way, if you go to San Juan del Sur in Nicaragua, you ask about Joëlle, the whale girl, they all know about me. So that is very important that they feel very included in this project. Then the conservation actions, well, what does it mean? Well, we are trying to have a safe environment for whales, so by removing trash from the beach. So we have had 1 ton of garbage collected, and that was actually only in 1 year. This year we started again. Now my PhD is done. I can reactivate the beach cleanups, and we are doing great. I think we had already 100 kilos removed from the beach just in February. So that's pretty cool. So the whale watching law that was mentioned earlier, and then also the participation to those international legislations for whale protection. And I also have a citizen science program. So that's also a way to include local communities into the whale conservation project. So they are letting me know whenever they see whales. So they're sharing that with me. Then we talked about the animal rescue. So you just see quickly like the olive ridley turtles that get caught into the fishing nets. We have Ellen, the green turtle, that literally when we caught her, she was almost dead. And look at her, how she's going. Then we have also an American white ibis that we got from through our survey. So I try to do my best to have a positive impact for marine animals, and not only whales and dolphins. So that was mentioned in the introduction. So the humpback whales, well, I don't know if you guys all know everything about humpback whales, but I just like will quickly introduce it. So they have the size of a bus. I'm sorry, the metrics are European, so it's about 15 meter, but I'm pretty sure you all know the size of a bus approximately. They weigh like a small Airbus, like 40 tons. That's why it's very important to keep distances with whales so they don't jump on you. They're marine mammals, so they have cows, they have hair. Actually, yesterday, my colleague from Ukraine showed me a picture where he managed to capture a picture of the hair on the rostrum of the whale. That's pretty impressive. And they're warm-blooded, and of course, they're giving milk to their babies, so they're lactating animals. The gestation is about 11 months. Usually, humpback whales have a calf every year, every 2 years. So those animals are migratory animals, which means that they're traveling over a long distance. So usually a couple of thousands of kilometers. So what they will usually do is they will feed in cold and productive areas where they can find krill and or sardines, and that's where they can fill up their battery. So I put this little battery as a representation of their energetical budget. And this battery is actually transformed into their blubber. So they are storing this energy in fat, and they call it blubber. So let's say they're in the feeding area for a couple of months, and they're eating until they're, let's say, fat enough to start migrating. So this requires a certain amount of energy to be able to do this migration. Then they go to breeding areas, typically warm and tropical breeding areas. And there they need also a certain amount of energy to be able to give birth, doing the lactation, or finding a partner, showing off, breaching, and all these other activities that are related to breeding grounds. And then when they travel back, they need another portion of energy. So they have to make sure that they're managing really, really well their energy. That could mean that, for example, if their battery is not full as shown on this image, could mean that they migrate less far, or they don't migrate. I've heard that whales are hanging around in Monterey almost year round. Or it could also mean that if they have a lot of energy, they can stick longer in the breeding areas. But anyway, just to show you the conceptual framework of migration and how this energetical budget works in a very schematic way. So breeding areas are characterized by the presence of different group types, such as mother-calf pairs. So they're typically looking for warm, sheltered, and shallow waters. And they're thought to do that because they want to avoid predators and aggressive males. Then we have also typically singers, usually a male. Well, the song function is not very clear yet, but it's suspected to be used to delimitate territory to attract males and or females, and to coordinate migration, or the three of them together. It's not very clear how the singing exactly works. And then the last group that characterizes breeding areas are competitive groups. So typically it's one nuclear animal, so the female, that's followed by a few males. It could be 2, 3, 20, depending on the densities in the breeding areas. And they fight access to the female, and eventually one will mate with the female. So in the world, there are 14 different populations of humpback whales. I'm pretty surprised that a lot of people, a lot of people are surprised when I say that. They're like, "Oh, really?" The public thinks that there is just one big population everywhere. So there are 14 different, and the conservation status of all these populations are most of them are doing okay, so they're considered not at risk. However, we have a few populations that are considered endangered or threatened, like, for example, the Mexican population. I have seen Nicola Ransom that made a presentation about her research recently with you guys, and so that population is threatened. And the one in Central America is actually considered endangered. And you see that there are others like the in Northwest Africa, and then you have also a non-migratory population that's the only one in the Arabian Sea, and then we have in the one population that's also considered endangered in the Western North Pacific. However, today we are going to focus on the Central America population. And the question is, okay, well, there was a moratorium in 1982 in whale hunting. So why are some whale populations not doing well? That's currently not very clear. In Central America, in the early 2000s, there was a population size estimate of about 500 to 700 individuals. I always compare that to more or less the amount of people you have in one neighborhood. So that's really not a lot. And in 2021, I participated to that novel effort. We had about 1,496 individuals, so let's say 1,500. So the annual increase was about 1.6%. So we could say, yay, there is an increase in the population. But if you compare to other populations like Australia and Hawaii, well, the annual increase is much more than 1.6. For Hawaii, for instance, it's 6.5. Australia is 10.5. So what is going on there in Central America? Along the US West Coast, where different populations are mixing up, so typically along the US West Coast, you will have Mexican whales, Central American whales, Hawaiian whales, like feeding in the same area. And those guys represent more or less 5,000 individuals. And the annual increase is 8%. So, yeah, we wonder what's happening specifically for these Central America whales. So to evaluate threats, we need to generate knowledge on population dynamics and habitat use patterns and migratory routes, because at this point in Central America, there is a little amount of data available to actually know whatever is happening with the population. So the threats could be fishing gear entanglements, and we could compare it afterwards with fisheries effort. Vessel collisions is also a threat to humpback whales, and this is typically assessed by looking at the vessel traffic routes. And then if you know where the whales are and what they're doing and when they're doing it, then you can actually start assessing those threats. But before we can do that, in my PhD, I've been focusing in generating this basic knowledge to actually understand whatever is happening in Nicaragua. So this pioneer project started in San Juan del Sur, Nicaragua. This is the bay. You can see it's a small fisherman village. There is no more than 20,000 inhabitants, counting the surrounding area. In the town, I don't think there's definitely not that many people. There are like, a couple of hundred fishing boat, and then there are 2 catamarans and a few yachts, but it's overall very, very small. When I'm here, in California, I see so many boats compared to Nicaragua. You see this contrast. So Nicaragua is located in the center of Central America, and the project was designed on 2 different study sites. So you have this red one, I'll call it Northern Nicaragua, and then the blue one will be Southern Nicaragua. So San Juan del Sur is located in Southern Nicaragua. So when I started in 2016, I was interested to know what was the impact of the future interoceanic canal that they wanted to build there. So they wanted to do a canal like they wanted to do for Panama, so crossing around southern Nicaragua and crossing through the lake and everything to connect with the Caribbean. Um, the Caribbean. And so I wanted to know, okay, if I have data of an impacted site and data on a non-impacted site, then I will have great information. So Cascadia Research Collective did some data collection in northern Nicaragua between 2004 and 2008. And with Association ELI-S in the northern Nicaragua, we collected data 10 years later. Then in southern Nicaragua, we have data almost so since 2015 until now, minus 2019, because in 2018 there was a civil unrest and we had to stop the field work, but we came back in 2020. So what are we doing? We're collecting data and amongst other photo identifications, we identify humpback whale based on the colors observed on the ventral part of the tail, and that's unique, like your fingerprint. And this is how we're building up a catalog. So we have like different tails, and this is how we know how many whales are visiting Nicaragua. So I also use the citizen science data I mentioned. I was also collecting from fishermen and tourist operators, and I shared that with Ted Cheeseman and Happy Whale so that we could actually assess wherever there were connections with the rest of the world. So how did I proceed? So there you see the little panga, like they call it, is a fisher boat. And you see what I really, really love on this picture is the roof where nobody is sitting under. So we are spending a lot of time in the sun. And yeah, and since recently I have a chair. Before I was sitting on my knees. So it was pretty uncomfortable. But this is the little bit where we are collecting our data from. So for my thesis, PhD thesis, we collected over 2,000 hours of data. Now we are almost at 2,500 hours and spent almost 20,000 kilometers navigating for almost a year. And we collected quite a bunch of pictures, more than 2,000 pictures. And the other type of data we were collecting, well, we have a GPS and we are keeping the tracks. With the tracks are all the locations where we navigated to. So you can see that there are two tracks, and these two tracks were the 2 days I was yelling, I hope to find blue whales, which I didn't. So that you know, I just found olive ridley turtles and on this big track, and then on the other one I saw spotted dolphins. I still remember. So I've been also collecting acoustic data, so whale songs. I had so the photo ID and then group composition, behavior, and I measured also sea surface temperature. So in theory, the Central America population has its feeding areas along the US West Coast, and they are supposed to be in Central America approximately between December and April. This is something I'm saying it's supposed to be in approximately because at the moment I started the project, we didn't know. So the question was mainly the main questions were, okay, how many whales are actually, present in Nicaragua? How many groups do we see? How many animals are visiting? What are the social groups? Do we have mother calf pair singers and competitive groups? And what are their habitat use patterns? So how are they distributing in Nicaragua? So I used the photo ID data, the tracking data, and the acoustics to answer this question. So just to make the long story short, in northern Nicaragua and southern Nicaragua, we had humpback whales, so that was great news. But in northern Nicaragua, we had a lower encounter rate, which are the number of groups per kilometer multiplied by 100. And we had 3 times more whales than in southern Nicaragua. So that was a pretty interesting result. In terms of social groups, we had all the groups, the groups with calves, the singers, and competitive groups in both sides. So that was great. It's typical for breeding grounds. However, we saw that there were more groups with calves in northern Nicaragua compared to southern Nicaragua. So that was a very interesting result. Based on market capture models, we estimated that there were about 109 to 517 individuals that were visiting Nicaragua on a yearly basis. So that fluctuates between years. So it's a low number of whales, but remember, the population is pretty small. However, it could be related to the population size or it could be because some whales are displaying a high level of site fidelity. So if a whale is sticking around all the time, we will capture it more and more and more, so we can have a lower population estimate. So yeah, I'm skipping a little bit. I'm jumping here. So there in southern Nicaragua, we saw some feeding activity, which is a little bit weird because humpback whales are feeding. So how do we know they were feeding? Okay, we saw literally the whale with the mouth open and sardines jumping out of the mouth. And on the picture A, if I zoom on it, you can even see the eyes of the sardines. So it's pretty sure they were feeding on sardines. And you have also whale poo, so you have this darker color in the water, and also association with marine birds and dolphins. And we have seen feeding behaviors, and we typically call it supplemental feeding because it's to supplement their feeding behaviors in feeding areas. So the supplemental feeding observations were made between February and April, and it actually increased with the month. So that was a pretty interesting discovery because we saw that for 2 years, but actually we saw it over every year. We saw the whales doing that every year. So we have in northern Nicaragua, well, mostly mother calf pairs resting, traveling, and then we have adults that would be more milling, feeding in deeper and colder surface waters. But what was interesting to see, it was that between the two, like the distance between northern and southern Nicaragua is like 350 kilometers. And we had only like 2 photographic recaptures. And that really caught my attention. I was like, okay, what does it mean? Like, does it mean that those whales are also having different migratory pathways? Are they going to similar sites throughout their migration north and south? So to answer this question, I actually raises a few questions. So first of all, where are the whales going in their feeding areas? Do they have a certain affinity or preference for certain areas along the route? And what is their migratory timing? So that's the moment I connected with Ted and Happy Whale, and I said, hey, can I have, there are recaptures of the whale tails. Where have we seen them? And the result is that most of the whales, or all of them, were seen along the US West Coast, and some of them were seen in British Columbia, Canada. But most of them, so the thicker, the thickness of the line here you see is indicating that there are more individuals recaptured. And you see that between Southern California and Northern California, that's where we see most of the whales. But the line is even thicker in Central California. So this is like Monterey Bay, San Francisco. This is the area where the Nicaraguan whales are going. So I looked at I'll just stop this. So I made a graph. Yeah, that's better. I made a graph with the month on the x-axis and then the number of recaptures on the y-axis. And you can see that in the feeding area on the top, we could see Nicaraguan whales, right? This is only whales seen in Nicaragua. I'm not talking about any other countries in Central America. So Nicaraguan whales were seen between January and December. So that's pretty interesting because we see also that there is a peak in between July and October. So, so if we look at the breeding area, how we see the peaks, we see that, well, on the bottom graph, you see that Nicaragua is the light gray and then black is other. Other is actually Mexico and other Central American countries. The whales were seen in October, and then it started in October, November, and then December you start to have a peak. So it's like the reverse tendency than what we see in feeding areas. And then you see, well, it's pretty logic that we see whales between January and then until April. So that's pretty interesting. We don't have any data between October and December in Nicaragua. Since the last 2 years, we have been surveying in December and we do see whales. However, we don't have any data between October and November. So here you have a dynamic map where you see where the whales are located based on the recaptures. So you really see that April, June, July, they're along the US West Coast. The darker the color, the more recaptures we have. And then you clearly see, I'll have a look at it again. You clearly see that, you know, they're going south starting from October. But I want you also to pay attention to that this little circle that's moving around the Costa Rica dome. It's a nutrient-rich area that is moving. It's spatially and temporally moving around. And what is interesting is it is actually going toward the coast between starting in February. I just call your attention so that you see this dynamic pattern of the Costa Rica dome. So we did a cluster analysis. So for those that are like, what is this? The main message you have to get out of this figure is that we actually looked at any tendencies of, you know, clusters in the recaptures. So we saw that in northern Nicaragua, remember that's the red ones, they had a higher site affinity with Guatemala, El Salvador, Baja California, and Northern California. And then if we look at Southern Nicaragua, the blue guys, they were most likely seen in mainland Mexico. So here, mainland Mexico, you have Southern California and Central California. And then we have three different groups that has no connection specifically with Nicaragua. So you have Southern Costa Rica and Northern Costa Rica. What does it mean? Perhaps we did a picture of a whale. It was just like in transiting to Costa Rica. So those could be Costa Rica whales. Then we have Panama, Panama here, the orange one that was connected with Oregon. And then we have Southern Mexico that was most likely seen in Baja California, Washington. And it's really interesting because the further north, you know, it goes in further north in Central America, the furthest north it's seen in the feeding area. There's kind of a pattern minus Panama, but the others are pretty, you know, well structured. So that's why this was published, and I'm suggesting spatial structuring within the population, with some whales having a preference for certain areas compared to others. But with the citizen science data, when I was looking at this graph, so again, you see the month on the x-axis and then the y on the, the number of sightings on the y-axis, you see that we have sightings between July and October. And remember, I told you that in Nicaragua, whales are coming between December and April. So I was like, why are there whales over a couple of years, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, they see whales between July and October? That's pretty awkward. So my first idea was like, okay, well, there's this other population coming from Antarctica that's going up to the south of Costa Rica that's really well known. And I was like, is it possible that the whales are actually, you know, crossing this boundary that we make up, right? But they're going up to Nicaragua and we are seeing Antarctica whales. So I had this only fluke. There's only one whale fluke we have from that period of the year, and I uploaded it to Happy Whale. And so that you know the little story behind it, I went to see my main supervisor of the thesis, and I was like, I think I made a great discovery. We have whales from Antarctica. And he was like, well, Joelle, you don't have any proof. And as long as you don't have the proof, you know, it's just whatever you make up. So I uploaded this tale to Happy Whale, and exactly 1 week after, I received an email saying they have a recapture in Antarctica. So I was like, hooray, I was right. We have whales that are actually visiting from Antarctica. Isn't that amazing? So you know, there is like a lot of questions that are popping up, like, you know, are they exchanging at all? Are those whales meeting each other temporally? They're not supposed to be together, but, you know, it could be that some whales are wandering around. And so this discovery is pretty interesting because also the Southern Hemisphere population is doing much better in terms of number of animals. And so genetically, they could be, you know, provide a positive impact for this endangered population. So understanding that would be like understanding if there's any exchange or population connectivity would be great. So this is actually something I would like to do in the future, is looking at the genetics, but also at the whale songs to see if there is any exchange between the populations. And currently, I'm also involved into a North Pacific project where we are comparing between Japan, the Philippines, Hawaii, Mexico, and Central America to see if there is any song exchanges. And definitely, if we find some exchanges with the Southern Hemisphere, Central America could be the source of, song propagation between the south and the north, or the north to the south. That's not clear in which direction it would be. So that's pretty exciting. So remember I told you there was this Costa Rica dome? That's a feature that's stimulating ocean productivity. So my question was like, hooray, I have two population. One population that's present when there is upwelling going on, so a lot of food, sea surface temperature is decreasing, chlorophyll A, so a proxy, a parameter for ocean productivity is increasing. So I was like, great, I have a population that's coming with ocean productivity increase, and then I have another one coming, in another period of the year, but the dome is not in the coastal area, it's offshore. So I have been conducting data collection in the coastal area, and I was wondering, okay, how are whales responding to upwelling in this coastal area? Knowing I have one population with upwelling, one population without upwelling. So I've been looking at remote sensing data, so satellite image data, where I extracted chlorophyll A, to look at ocean productivity. But then I also looked at time-lagged chlorophyll A. Why? Because chlorophyll A represents phytoplankton, and phytoplankton are actually plants, and humpback whales are eating zooplankton. So they are eating krill. So the time, that that zooplankton is growing can have a certain time lag. So when you capture in a certain month chlorophyll A, but the time that the zooplankton is produced could take a little while. So for this reason, I looked at the time lag of 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, and 4 months, just to make sure to see and how much it would take to have zooplankton or sardines, of course, because in Nicaragua, I've seen them rewind. I saw them feeding on sardines, sorry. So, this is a trophic cascade, and that could take some time. So to look at how whales are responding, I use two response variables. The number of groups, so are the number of groups per kilometer increasing when there is more food, basically? So you could have 3 groups per kilometer, representing 5 whales per kilometer. So the other parameter was the number of whales instead of groups, because you could have also 3 groups, but you could have 9 whales, right? So according to that, I was looking at if we had more groups or if we had more whales with ocean productivity. So the result, and I'm kind of shortcutting a little bit, but the parameter that was actually explaining the response was the 4-month time lag. So the humpback whales from the southern hemisphere did not present any response to productivity, which is normal because there was no significant ocean productivity increase, when the southern hemisphere whales are there. So they're kind of left out of the story at this point. But here we have the humpback whales of the Central America population, where there is an increase in ocean productivity, and we see that there is a 4-month time lag. So we have peaks in chlorophyll A around November and December, and then typically we would see more whale feeding in March and April. And that's actually also what we have seen in the field. Remember, between 2017 and 2018, I told you that the number of feeding events were increasing from February to April. So here we have like a nice confirmation that humpback whales are actually responding to ocean productivity in a breeding area. So that's pretty cool. I'm working on this paper to be published. So basically, I know this is a lot of information, but what you have to remember is that in Nicaragua, there are 2 breeding populations. We have the Central America population that are actually feeding here, Monterey, San Francisco, and then we have the breeding stock G, so the Southern Hemisphere whales. And within the Central America, well, I suspect that there is, well, differences in habitat use patterns, but also spatial structuring, and that this population is pretty small. The feeding areas where they are going to is completely different. The Central America goes to the Northern Hemisphere, US West Coast feeding area, and the breeding stock G goes to Antarctica. And then, last but not least, what the take-home message is that Central America whales are taking advantage of increased local productivity to perform supplemental feeding. And we are seeing, annual feeding behaviors and higher, well, number of groups per kilometer. So what I want to do in the future, and what brought me here into to Santa Cruz, will become clear in a second, but I think you kind of suspect it. So the things I really want to continue investigating are these feeding patterns. How often are they occurring? What is their overall health? So I'd like to look at their how this feeding is influencing their site fidelity. Like, for example, looking at social structure, how is it triggering any social structure in humpback whales? So that this is like the next step. And based on the social structure, I want to define if all the whales are feeding. Based on my field observations, not all the animals are feeding. Only some of them are kind of feeders, and others are just there for breeding. So don't remember that in Nicaragua, they're still breeding. It's not a 100% feeding area. It's kind of, they come for breeding, and then potentially they're feeding. So feeding is just like a secondary activity. However, I don't know who is doing it and how frequently they're doing it. So, and also how is it affecting their overall health? So with drones, I'd like to measure the whale body condition, and I would like to measure the body size and see, okay, is this whale well fat when it arrives, or not that fat, but after feeding they're actually increasing their body weight, and so on. So with the tags, I'd like to look at feeding frequency, so see how often are they feeding. Are they feeding just once, or are they feeding all day long, all night long, and for 2 weeks, so with the tags, and that's why I'm in the Friedlander lab to learn about biotelemetry and behavioral ecology, specifically learning about feeding behaviors, because I've been in a breeding area, so it was really, really strange for me to see feeding patterns, and I was also feeling a little bit overwhelmed, because I was like, how are whales actually feeding? So that's why I'm here, to learn about, feeding behaviors, and understand also migratory patterns. So I'm learning about the suction cup tags, but also about implantable tags, to know how whales are to know more about the migratory routes of the whales. So with all this information, the purpose is to understand how whales will respond to global warming and habitat degradation. We can assess how the fishing gear can impact and the vessel collision, as well as unsustainable tourism activities, and also how they could potentially respond to pollution or genetic impoverishment, if there's any impoverishment, knowing that there is maybe population connectivity. So that's it for me. I hope you learned a lot of things today. And so if you want to contact me, I wrote here my email address. I will be at the Whale Fest in Monterey in April 12th and 13th. So if you're around, I'd love to connect with you there. In case you're interested, I have some lovely whale rings made in Nicaragua, handmade in Nicaragua. So that's supporting the project and local people. And yeah, I didn't know there was this ocean film festival also in San Francisco. Suzanne told me that offline a few minutes ago, so I might go on April 11 and will consider to go there. So maybe I can connect with you guys there too. So that's it, and I am happy to hear your questions.
That was fantastic, Joelle. I mean, just so much. You didn't disappoint in terms of your description, which was, the really interesting discoveries and around the feeding. And I don't know, my mind was going like with the Antarctic population. I wonder if they, if there's ever any interbreeding or they get together.
I know, we're all wondering the same thing.
You gotta see the Farallons. No, you gotta see Antarctica.
I know, and I'm not even sure like where if the whales are really going. I mean, I have one connection with Antarctica, but I've been doing also field work on whales from, well, the Southern Hemisphere whales, and I wondered if they're coming from Chile feeding areas or Antarctica because other studies showed that Central America whales are actually feeding in Chile. So yeah, it's pretty fascinating. There's so many questions I still want to answer.
Really great. So, wait, are there any questions or?
I think you might have covered it well enough. This might be a first timer where it's where there isn't too much not too many questions. One thing
Ooh.
just kind of if you would go over more of your personal experience in Nicaragua, what was it like kind of living in some of the local communities over there? And just can you describe like any day-to-day activities that you were most excited about or that were the just kind of what your experience was like?
So your question is like how I experienced to work with local communities, basically, like overall. Well,
Exactly, yeah, and kind of the research teams and everything like that.
Um, well, it at first when I arrived there like I want to do research about whales in Nicaragua. So that was pretty clear. So I arrived there and I was like, I am here, guys. I'm going to help you save the whales. And they were like, well, sorry, we're not very excited about this at this point. So it took me a while to kind of, I had to reach out a lot and make sure, really connect with the people, having meetings with them and, like be there and in general it's better to meet people in person rather than sending emails. They can see who you are and sense who you are, and that's very important to build the trust. Also, there is another thing that's very important for me and that I've been applying in Nicaragua is like I'm very transparent. Like I want to do a beach cleanup. I called the mayor's office. I'm saying, hey, I'm going to do a beach cleanup. Like they're aware of everything that I'm doing. And that helps also to build trust, not just doing whatever I want without telling anybody. So that is a very important point to, build this trust with the authorities, but also with the local communities. And so also with the fishermen, it was pretty challenging, being a woman and being also another skin color. That's a reality. That was pretty challenging at first, to kind of say, hey, whatever, and get further than, can I have your phone number? That was at first, but after they understood, I made it clear I was there for the whales, and then they're very excited now. They call me to say, hey, I see a whale there, I see a whale there, and that's like the evolution of these relationships. So, but it took years, and next year it's going to be 10 years that I'm working in Nicaragua, and when I see how it all evolved, and now in the town in San Juan del Sur, and I'm so proud of that. They put like two big statues of humpback whales in just in the middle of their village, and that's definitely because I've been bugging them a lot about humpback whales because they were turtle, and I said you should have a humpback whale. I mean, why only turtles? You have whales, and it happened. So I'm really proud that that's kind of a visual representation of all this energy I've put in it, and they started valuing the whales, and there is this law, and even the government is very excited. Of course, they see also the benefits for their tourism, but they're very excited to know that they have whales, and they're also very happy, and they say it often that they have someone that an expert on whales in their country. And yeah, and so I also fluently speak Spanish to help, this communication is really the key for me. So that's a little bit my experience in a nutshell.
Amazing, thank you. And we've had some other ones starting to flow in as you were talking.
Yay.
This one, another one, kind of more on the personal front. There's a question from a young marine biologist who is kind of just starting out. She wants to know how you kind of able to stay motivated in your research when you're, it's a tough field starting out, and it's not always easy to get grants. So, do you have any tips on kind of staying motivated in the early days?
Okay, so I asked this question myself to Jane Goodall herself. I was like, "How did you get motivated?" And I was saying that I think I was depressed when I asked that question. So, my motivation and my determination, because it was definitely very, very challenging because I didn't have any funding. I mean, I was applying to foundations and grants and stuff, and that's how I made it work. So it was definitely more work, but I do it for the whales. It's just because I know they need someone, to fight for them, and that's how I keep moving forward because I strongly believe that we need people. If conservationists are giving up, then who will believe in the future? So that's the idea I'm trying to hold on to, and I do think I do it for the whales. I really do it for them, and I try to be as I do most that I can to help and make positive impact for the world. So I think I don't know if that's of any help, but for sure I got a lot of grants that were rejected, and yeah, a lot. So, but I'm like, oh, whatever. I remember there is actually a grant, just so that I applied like 4 times, and I think at the fourth time they were like, okay, Joel, we will give it to you. I think they were just so tired, and so just like persistence, keep going, and you will have rejection, but that's part of the journey. You won't have a yes everywhere. So just you need to say okay and learn from it. Try to get feedback on your application to try to improve it. So that would be the advice I could give.
Makes sense. Thank you. And then I guess shifting back to kind of your Nicaragua experience a little bit, did the area that you were staying in or kind of that you traveled to, was there a lot of benefit to the local economy from whale tourism or kind of marine biology tourism, or was it still kind of, has it not been discovered by tourists yet?
So there were some people offering whale watching trips, but it was not really developed. That's why I wanted to develop this whale watching, law before it's getting crazy, right? By the way, in August, I just suddenly woke up and I was like, wait, we have a law, but we don't have certifications. It doesn't make any sense. So now I'm currently talking with the National Institution of Tourism to create a certification, and I'll probably certify myself, the fisherman, for a safe whale watching in the area. But to answer your question, there is more and more people because they see that people are actually, I am talking about the whales, and people get really excited about the whales, and not only me, but definitely through the project there is like a community, and people talk, they say, oh, there is the whales in San Juan, and so there is more and more, and I see that on social media more and more people offering whale watching tours, so that it's critical I get this certificate done. But definitely I see, and now that they have this statue in the middle of the town, and they also have explanation about turtle and why whales are important, whatever. So they're also definitely like creating more interest. So I forecast that there will be more and more people, sorry, doing whale watching. However, I would love that they go more in the southern hemisphere whales because there are much more of them. So that would be better. But for now, it's high season is now, and high season is with the Central America population. So certification is critical at this point.
Makes sense. And then there's another question kind of back to the personal front. Did you have any family members that inspired you that were kind of as adventurous as you are? And was your family and kind of your friends growing up supportive of the adventures that you've taken? How has that been?
So my parents are, very modest. They've been working hard their whole life in the mayor's office. They had a very administrative work, and they're amazing. They're still amazing parents, and they did their best to provide whatever I needed. So I wanted to study biology, and they were supportive. Well, the day I said, Mom, I want to study whales, she once said, I think you should find a job, and but she never said it twice. She tried once to say like maybe you should find but yeah, then she saw there was no way she would take this idea out of my head. She always say when you have an idea in your head, you don't have it elsewhere. So, so in that sense, my family is very, very supportive. My sister makes amazing bracelets for the project so that we can sell them, and she's also helping with the, accountancy. And whenever I have events, my brother is coming, my dad, they're all very, very supportive. I'm very fortunate and blessed to have such a great family that's supporting me. And that's also a very important parameter, having, your family and friends support. And the day of my PhD, I mean, and also, what I really, really like about my journey is that I involved a lot of people and donors, because people can donate to the project. I had sponsors and whatever. And so all these people, or most of the people, came to the PhD defense. So for me, it was a very, very special moment. And half of the people were crying because they were like, she did it. So it was a very special moment. But just to say that these people were feeling emotional because they supported, and they were within the adventure and following the whole story, and the whole challenge and the whole journey from the start. That was very special. So yes, I've been very, I had a great support for sure.
We should
Amazing.
website. We should put your website in the chat so that that people can follow up with it as well. I'm assuming you have a good website for your association.
Yeah.
There it is. Great.
Oh, great. And then I guess kind of shifting back towards whales themselves. Do you have a sense for the approximate pod size of humpbacks in Antarctica?
Yeah, so the population size, I think it's about 20,000 animals. Like the population is pretty big. It's really big, really, really big. So you can imagine 1,500 versus 20,000. So it's, yeah, when I study the Southern Hemisphere, it's just every day is a new whale. I'm like, I don't know you. It's like every day there's another whale. While the Central America population, I'm like, huh, I know this one today. They saw the whale Gaia. We have seen that whale in 2020 singing. So it's nice because I have much more connection with the Central America population because I know the whales, they have a name. And yeah, there is a special connection with these whales for sure.
Absolutely. And I guess one more before we let you go. Along your journey, has there been any amazing facts or tidbits about humpbacks that have really blown your mind?
Well, I think like uh so for me, like the feeding was very, very mind blowing for me, because the first time I saw that, I was like, you're not supposed to do this, I think that's for sure like the most compelling moment for me was this feeding. Seeing these whales feeding was incredible. I have a lot of great souvenirs trying to capture a picture of them feeding, almost falling in the water for that. But you know, it's I have great memories of that.
Yeah, when you
Awesome.
said,
Well,
I was going to say, just when you said in that one photo that you could, if you zeroed in, you could see the eye of the sardine.
Yeah.
It's pretty great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You saw it full of sardines. So yeah, I'm really, really interested in seeing how, this response of the whales in ocean productivity, how much it's influencing their site fidelity. Because if the whales are basically sticking around more often or longer because of the feeding, that means that, if you have whale watching industry, they're watching the same whales over and over again, which might impact the whales in the long term. So the ecotourism, but also the fisheries, right? Because they fish around the whales. And so there could be like this and also their migratory timing, because the feeding whales are staying a little bit longer. So I don't know how much that impacts, on the routes, if they come along other fishing practices because they are going into another timing. So those are things that I would like to investigate a little bit more.
I thought the point about, did you call it a dome, the
Yeah.
productivity? Can you say a little bit more about that, Joelle, about what we know about that? Or is it affected by La Nina or El Nino? I mean,
Yeah, so yeah, it's not very, I have yeah, so that's part of the things I would like to investigate, like how much influence El Nino La Nina had on potential feeding. Um but definitely, like the dome I showed, it was a like a circle, but the dome is like a widespread area, and sometimes it's big, sometimes it's small. It really changes, but I'm not sure if this variability is related to El Nino La Nina. I'm not sure about that. Potentially, yes. So the productivity is not the same every year. It really, really fluctuates. It's a very, very dynamic thing, I just put a circle to simplify it, but it's much more complex. Sometimes it goes to southern Mexico, like it covers a big area from Central America. It's not only in southern Nicaragua, so this could, maybe whales would feed also in southern Mexico if that's a year there's a lot of productivity. So I don't know that, probably. And I don't know either if the Southern Hemisphere whales are going offshore following the dome and feeding there, I don't know either. There's a lot of things I don't know. It's just like kind of, I opened the box and there's like so many questions coming up. Um, so
it
yeah,
sounds like you have a whole lot that will occupy you, and we'll all be the benefit of it in the years to come.
yeah,
So,
I will be busy. Actually, at the end of my PhD defense, the jury said, "Oh, you're busy for the rest of your career." Yeah.
right. Okay, well, again, thank you so much, Joelle. This has really been true to your description again. It's just so exciting to see that these discoveries and what it does portend for new discoveries down the road. So we'd like to stay in touch with you. And
Well,
yes, you maybe at the Ocean Film Festival, or at least before your scholarship or your term ends. So
okay, well, thank you so much for having me again, and I'm really, really, really excited I could present here tonight, and I'm so happy I had this opportunity. So thank you for having me um, in this meeting, and hopefully I see you in the Ocean Film Festival in San
uh,
Francisco or in another event. If you know of any other event, I'm really excited to come over in San Francisco.
excellent. All right. Well, then we'll leave it at to be continued.
All
All right.
right, great.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.